All right, it's right at 2 p.m. So I guess we can go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for joining us today on our awesome session on objection handling and role play. I want to turn it over to our speakers, David and Reshmi, to kick us off.
Sounds good. I'm sharing my screen right now so we can get that going. Reshmi, you're good? You can see that?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks. We'll go ahead and kick off this CS Skills Exchange. Appreciate everyone joining us today. My name is David Astor. I am a solution architect manager here at GitLab, and I am joined today by Reshmi Krishna, our incredible SA manager out of the US West. Now, today, Reshmi and I are going to talk to you about handling objections. And if you saw the 5 whys talk at SKO, you know I like to get into a little bit of the psychology of the subject and give it a little more information behind it before we jump right in. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into some reasons why folks may object, some of the common categories of those objections, and then we'll walk through some proven techniques, and we'll even have a role play or two with some examples at the end. Now, our intention today is to cover objection handling as a process and not necessarily as a solution to GitLab specific objections. You'll see some of that in the role play, but with the techniques we cover and the examples we provide, we're going to be really better preparing you for handling GitLab objections as they come your way. And one last thing I'll mention is that before we get started, is that by introducing this topic to you in the hopes, we're introducing this topic to you in the hopes that in future calls and future team calls or future calls amongst yourselves, we have some brave souls that will engage in some deliberate practice by running through some objection handling scenarios. So if there are no objections, we'll jump right in. That was going to happen. That was going to happen. All right. So every one of us has had some objection thrown their way at some point, right? So we're in sales. It's a natural part of it, right? Objections are going to come. But it's important to know that objection does not equal rejection, right? Objections can really be looked at as a need to have additional conversation. So when someone is objecting to you, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If there's an objection, there's often interest to them in what we have to say, but we just haven't proven it out to them yet, right? And so I want to enforce that you're going to get objections in all shapes and sizes. They're going to come at you different words, different verbiage, but generally they can be distilled down into one of the 3 reasons we see here. First is that they're skeptical of the product or service, right? It sounds too good to be true, what you're saying. You haven't proven it to me yet. Second is that there may be a misunderstanding or miscommunication, right? Perhaps someone says, we already have source code management. Why would I need GitLab? Well, we haven't really proven to them yet, or we haven't shown the full value that GitLab can provide. So again, it's a misunderstanding there. And third is that they're stalling. Maybe someone is not really the decision maker, or someone's shopping around. These are all examples of stalls, and we're going to get into some of these in just a moment. Okay? So let's talk about the first one here. When we talk about skepticism, there are 4 common reasons why someone may feel this way. First is the lack of trust or rapport, right? We've heard it from time and time. We've heard it time and time again. You buy from people that you like. You buy from people that you trust. It's extremely important to develop a rapport and gain the trust of your customer, your prospect. And this is doubly important for us because we're the technical part of the sales process. We have to come across as trustworthy to know the ins and outs of the product. We have to truly listen to our prospects when they're talking, or our customers when they ask questions. If you just come back with quick responses and cast aside their objections, this is going to go badly. Now, the second reason why people are skeptical is because they've asked poor questions, or you're asking poor questions, or you're giving poor answers, as you can see here. Yes, the Declaration of Independence is signed, and it's at the bottom, but come on. This leads to the second reason, is asking poor questions or giving knee-jerk responses. If you're not really in touch with the customer's needs, they're going to know that right away. They're going to raise objections because they'll feel you don't understand them. If you don't know the answer, it's absolutely fine to do so, to say so. And I think that all of us actually do that pretty well here, right? We will involve product when we need to. We'll get other members of the team involved. So that's fine. I don't see us doing that a lot. But the last thing you want to do is really start monologuing. It's a normal response to want to come across as that the facts and data, and you know what you're doing. So you use the facts and data to back that up, right? You want to convince them that hey, I'm smart, I deserve to be here. But it's best when asked a question to pause and even if you've been asked that question 100 times before, this is the first time that this customer has asked it to you. So you want to be respectful of that. You want to pause. You want to look like you're thinking about it, write it down, collect your thoughts, and then answer, because again, that goes a long way into building rapport with them for the first one. The third reason is a poorly delivered presentation. Delivering things like harbor tours, kitchen sinks, show up and throw up demos, whatever you want to call them, that's going to raise tons of objections. Because if we're not demonstrating the value back to them that they need to see, we might as well not even be talking. They can read lots of stuff on our website and via marketing materials, and no doubt in this day and age, they probably already have. And this is key for us as customer success representatives, because if we really get what they need and we understand their pains, we could probably do the demo in less time. There's no reason to talk for an hour if the first 20 minutes solves their problem, right? So as you're going through the demo, pause, ask them, is it resonating with them? Making sure you're giving them exactly what they want to see, so you're not getting a bunch of objections at the end that we didn't cover what they expected to see. And then finally, the fourth reason why people are skeptical about things is because you've overpromised. It's very important for customers to know that if they ask for something, they'll know when they're going to get it. And again, I don't see this as a big problem here with our customer success team, because there's issues that customers can follow along with. Maybe we've already got something there. Or even better, they can create one themselves and directly impact what's happening with the product. There's product managers we can bring to the table, as I mentioned. There's a public roadmap for folks to see that what we're planning to release and when. But really, to break it down, though, if someone thinks something is too good to be true, they'll put up barriers around it. So just quickly, by nature, human beings like being in their comfort zone. So selling them a product outside of what they're used to, or discussing in a way that's demeaning or not related to their value, that's going to put up barriers to the sale. So the other two reasons for objections deserve a little love here as well. Misunderstandings are going to happen. We're trying to build a relationship with the customer, and things may get miscommunicated. It's not so unlike the game of telephone, as you see here, that we played as kids. If someone says one thing and it's repeated as something different, it's understood by somebody a different way. This is going to happen on both sides, right? They may say something we don't quite understand, and we may say something back that gets misconstrued. So it's up to us to make sure that we're communicating effectively and with our prospects to limit these types of misunderstandings. This again goes back to practicing things like active listening, and especially doing so with an empathetic ear. Now, a good strategy to help with misunderstanding is to clarify with questions. Show them you care about their objection. Show them, as I mentioned, show them you care, because their first initial objection may be what's referred to as a smoke screen. So essentially, this is something that they're putting up, and it may mask the real objection that they're hiding. So saying something like, hey, that's an absolutely valid concern. If we were to completely address that, what other concerns would you have? And if they say none, that's it, great. You've got to the real objection. You've got to the pain point. But if they say there's others, well, then obviously you've got some more work to do. So you're on your way to finding out the real objection. So don't just take the first objection they put up as the one and only. Make sure you ask clarifying questions about that to make sure there are no misunderstandings. And then finally, speaking of smoke screens, speaking of smoke, if anyone has done any low and slow smoking on a barbecue grill, there's the concept of the stall. When you smoke larger cuts of meat like brisket or a pork shoulder, basically what happens is the meat gets to a certain temperature and then it stops, sometimes for a really long time, but it eventually gets going again. And this is analogous to an objection in sales, right? Things are moving along smoothly, and then all of a sudden something stalls out, or it stalls out for some reason or other. And stalling is just, as I mentioned, a reason why objections come up. But much like in the barbecue world, there are ways of mitigating the stall. And usually this just involves, as we talked about, again, asking more questions. Oftentimes they don't want to make a decision, so stalling helps them avoid this, right? An example of this may be they're not authorized to make a decision. So they're keeping you at bay by just saying, well, we'll keep talking to you about this. And you can handle something like that by asking, well, who do I talk to? Again, that's a rather simple way to get through that. Maybe we don't have time, or we don't have budget. These are all stalls as well. And again, there's still interest there. But so further conversations with them on the true value of the solution is going to help. And the last example, something like, call me back in 6 months, that seems like a brush off, but you can ask questions like, well, what's going to be different in 6 months here? Help me understand that. And if they truly come back with a reason, fine, that's great. Put it on your calendar to call them back in 6 months. And now you've got 6 months to prep for a really, truly kick butt value delivery demo. So the main point of all of this is to remind you to ask questions. I've said this on every slide so far. And to reiterate, an objection is not a rejection. And we don't want to shy away from someone saying that they're using a competing product, for instance, because that's great. It shows they have interest in DevOps. We can work with that. We can continue to talk to them about something like that. We don't want to walk away just because they say they're using something different. So most of what I talked about today, seeking to understand, gaining trust, it's backed up by the 5 whys process that we talked about at SKO. And remember, as opposed to just saying, why, and putting prospects on the defensive using that, using those questions, we gave alternatives at how to ask questions in a softer way in that presentation. Things like using the tell me about, describe for me, explain to me, model. The tell, describe, explain model is really good here because it helps uncover more information and it keeps the customer talking as opposed to things like asking closed-ended questions and this not getting what you need. So essentially, you're seeking to understand what value really means to them. So this is just another quick reminder to be a gallant and not a goofus when it comes to asking the right questions. And if you need reminders of what that means, please check out the links on this slide, which will give you to the 5 whys recording from SKO and also the accompanying slide deck. So now I'm going to pass it over to Reshmi to talk about the objection handling process and how it's broken down even further. So Reshmi, I'll stop sharing and let you take over.
Sure. Thank you, David. Let me share my screen. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Looks good.
All right, cool. So just to summarize what David has already said, the objection handling process can be broken down into 5 parts. The first one is, again, listening, right? So when somebody points an objection, it's very natural for us to get defensive, right? So just make sure you're using your active listening skills and really trying to understand where the core of the objection is and why it's coming, right? The second is, again, David mentioned, asking thoughtful questions and asking questions that will take you really to the core of the objection, and also kind of understanding the body language, right? Are they closed? Are they open for a discussion? Kind of, judging by looking at them. Also, you can use a technique called tip the bucket here. So what that is essentially where you try to get to all the objections at one time, and then you try to tip the bucket in your favor. So essentially once, for example, if somebody tells me, well, I'm using Jenkins CI, you kind of try to drill deeper into if they have any pain points and kind of try to approach from that direction instead of going head on against Jenkins, right? The third is, of course, like thinking about techniques. So we will talk a lot about different techniques. We will also do some role playing with some of the GitLab customer examples that I've collected from you all. And we'll really see how we can apply some of those techniques in our customer examples. And the fourth is handling, right? This is where, again, you are in no obligation to, go with any of these techniques. You can use more than one. You will see in one of our role playing, we are using 2 techniques, or you can use your, your field expertise. And you can, essentially the whole point here is to be natural and to handle the objection like a pro. There's another technique, which is really, I have seen a lot of success with, and this is something that comes from the project management field of the house, using parking lot. So essentially you might come across folks in the meeting whose only aim is to object. And you will see when you do, these customer meetings, so they will keep on raising objections. So at that point, it's up to you to kind of utilize, okay, this is the time I have an hour. And of course, discuss the success criteria of the meeting with yourself before you go into the meeting, and kind of try to parking lot those questions. Of course, get back to them at a later point, but don't let them derail your meeting. That's another important thing here. And again, at the end, just check with the customer, right? If you have handled all the objections, and definitely use empathy, right? Making sure you're either parking locking or handling all of their objections at the end of this exercise. And of course, then, go for your sales close. Cool. So now moving forward, we're going to look at some of the techniques. We're not going to cover all. The techniques are actually, all of them are listed in the SA handbook link, which I'll be providing you shortly. So the first one we'll be looking at here is LACE. So LACE is a very common 4-step objection handling technique that's used in the field. The first part of LACE is, again, listening, active listening. The second is accepting the objection, acknowledging, So one of the things you will see, and this is also in real life, right? So you will see when you accept or acknowledge the person's objection, they feel less defensive. So then they are more open to discuss why the objection is coming from and what's the core of the objection. The third is seeking and making a commitment. So you will see we'll use some of the techniques like conditional close, where you say, okay, if I handle this objection, are you willing to buy Ultimate? Or, what kind of commitment can you give me? And this is the commitment I'm making to you in terms of handling the objection. And the fourth one is where you're addressing the objection through explicit action, whether it's through a demo, whether it's really showing them the capability, because there's nothing like showing them what you just told them, right? So it kind of sticks. The second one we'll be going through is reframing. And this is really, really popular. This is where you change the cognitive frame of their mind. So essentially you up-level the conversation. So if somebody is talking about direct competitors, maybe we can up-level them to our DevSecOps play. Maybe we can talk about, security, shifting left, and so on. And you will see that in action in one of our customer examples. The third is feel, felt, and found. And again, this is something David will cover. This is where you empathize with customers' objection and kind of handle them from there. The fourth is a conditional close that I spoke about earlier already. Essentially, you make closure of this objection a condition for resolving their objection. And fifth is pushback. So this is a technique. This is useful when you have a lot of facts that you can throw at the customer, right? It's very important to use empathy here, because if not used correctly, pushback can look like arrogance and can kind of deviate you from that trusted advisor status that you want to get with the customer. So make sure, again, you're using empathy here. So these are the 5 techniques we'll be covering, and more techniques are, again, linked here. So there's a lot more. You can go and look at it, right? So one of the suggestions that both David and I have is making sure you're practicing these, right? So before you go into a meeting, you're talking to yourself and even contemplating the kind of objections you might get from your experience, and kind of practicing some of these techniques and seeing how you would have handled it differently. We do have an exercise for you all after this, which we will perform with every team meeting. We'll get to that in a bit. All right, David, you want to walk us through the scenario for today?
Sounds great. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the fictional company Tanuki Tech, which some of you may be familiar with. Who Tanuki Tech is. Tanuki Tech is a global, multifaceted organization that has their hands in everything from textiles to transportation. Today, we're going to be talking to 2 different folks at their North American division, one of the North American divisions, which is part of their up-and-coming media arm. This group is actually working on a new application that helps promote virtual concerts. So let's meet our players. We are going to be talking to Brianna and Robin. Brianna is the cunning head of app dev who's notoriously stalwart in negotiations. She prefers talking on the telephone as opposed to meeting in person, and has a million reasons why things should stay as they are. Robin is the lead developer who's relatively new to the organization and slowly becoming a faithful sidekick to Brianna. He's young at heart, loves working as part of a team, and he's an absolute acrobat with the code he writes. Tanuki Tech has multiple applications like Jenkins, GitHub, Artifactory, Veracode implemented as part of their DevOps solution. And so what we want to do is we want to talk to them in various different scenarios about the value that GitLab could provide. Okay, so let's take our first our scenario.
Sure. For this one, David will be Brianna, and then I will be Reshmi, the solution architect, handling the scenario here.
Sounds good. We'll just jump right in. So, hey, Reshmi. I appreciate what you're talking about. I appreciate what GitLab provides, but our current tool set is working well, and typically that's GitHub and Jenkins based.
Oh, that's great to hear, Brianna. Can you tell me a little bit more about your dev and sec process?
Yeah, our process pretty much follows the standard agile methodologies, along with using Veracode for security scanning. We have a security team who handles the security side of the house.
That's great to know. Can you tell me a little bit more about if you're happy with your stand times and if that helps you keep up with or inhibit your software iteration?
Well, I don't know, if, say happy with, but we only run the scans once the code is deployed to QA.
Oh, I see. So you're not able to scan every code change?
Not right now, but we do scan the entire code once it gets to QA.
Oh, interesting. So if you could scan all your code in dev, could you afford it today?
I'd probably have to do just a little more research. I'm not really sure.
Gotcha. So when your code gets to QA, are you overwhelmed by the number of findings? Do you think everything gets remediated at that time? If not, how do you prioritize and how much time and effort is required by the devs?
Well, when there's findings, QA takes care of that. They create tickets and they get information back to the developers and like a ticket tracking, a separate ticket tracking tool. And the devs and QA will then work together to get this fixed.
Gotcha. Thank you for that information, Brianna.
Sure.
So first, I understand that you already have existing tools and processes in place, which is working for you today. So there's no reason for change. However, with GitLab, you not only get SCM CI/CD, but you also get security built in. So I was working with an investment bank before this, where I followed a similar process to your team. It took us days, sometimes weeks, to fix security vulnerabilities in QA, because I, as a developer, I was already working on other Jira items. So imagine if the dev could really prioritize and fix vulnerabilities as part of their dev cycles before moving on to other issues. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, actually, that'd be great.
Great. Also with GitLab, there'll be no additional cost associated with additional environments or lines of code. You also get suggestions for remediation of those vulnerabilities, which personally is my favorite feature in GitLab.
That's pretty interesting. That I didn't know about. I would like to see a little more about that. Thanks.
Got it. Definitely. We also readily integrate with Jenkins using plugins for the CI part, so you can definitely leverage the security capability along with it.
So, okay, so we don't have to rip out, our entire process. You're mentioning we could work together with an existing application in our tool chain.
Exactly. We can work with Jenkins with you on that and make sure the security, part of GitLab, you can take advantage of that. So would you like to take a look at your demo to see how everything is working together as a single process and also how it integrates with Jenkins? This will allow you to take similar advantages as our other customers, like a big investment bank in New York City.
Sure, actually, that sounds really good.
Cool. How about March 4th at 1 p.m. PDT?
As long as it's on a telephone and there's no pop-up paparazzi around, that would work. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, Brianna. See you then. So pause here. Does anybody want to guess what technique I used here? What was going on?
Use LACE.
Yes, absolutely. So let me go to my file. Yes, it was LACE along with reframing, right? So what I did here was at the beginning, I used LACE and asked more questions, right? So I listened, I acknowledged, and then I went to a point where I wanted to understand what other tools they're using. And so Brianna told me about Veracode, which was like, great, right? This is where I can go to my DevSecOps play. So instead of going and attacking Jenkins CI build time, which I know a lot of our customers, have pain points around, I went to our DevSecOps play and I kind of reframed the conversation there and said, okay, let me not fight head on with Jenkins, instead of up-level the conversations and see if we can do the ultimate DevSecOps play here. The second thing was I also wanted to understand her pain points, right? So essentially the code getting scanned in QA, I personally know that's a pain point for a lot of the dev managers out there. So assuming they spend a lot of cycles and a lot of time, kind of pulling the developers back, doing auditing and kind of, making sure the QA process goes fine, I did understand that's a pain point and I kind of went there, acknowledged that. And again, I use reframing here. And as part of LACE, in order to close out, I used explicit next steps. So instead of saying, okay, let me get back to you on the email and let me send you some dates and time, which also works in a lot of the scenario. I had her there. She was the head of app dev. I wanted to just give her some time so we can just sync rather than, again, waiting on an email, which might cause delays. So I would pause here. Any questions before we go to the next technique? Okay, cool. All right.
All right. So in this one, I'll be doing this one. I'll be playing the role of David, and Reshmi will be playing the role of Robin. And in this scenario, just to set the context, we have had a demonstration. We have shown Robin some information about, we've shown GitLab to Robin, right? So starting now. Hey, Robin, thanks again for your time on the demonstration the other day. I wanted to follow up with you to see if what we demonstrated hit the mark.
It was certainly impressive, David. And there's been a lot of changes from the last time I saw GitLab.
I sense a however or a but coming here.
You're really good at reading people. You're right. GitLab's impressive, but I'm just not sure it's the right time for us to make any changes. We have got some big projects lined up, and both me and my teammates really don't have the bandwidth to learn a new tool.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. We certainly don't want to come in and disrupt everything. But let me bounce an idea off you. If we could fast track a training session for you and made sure your team knew how to operate GitLab, would that overcome that challenge?
Oh yeah, that'll be really helpful. And I could see that being useful for SCM, but unfortunately we are pretty set on Jenkins for CI.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I totally understand that, and that makes sense to me. That you're used to doing something that you've used for a while. Other customers have certainly felt that same thing, and one that comes to mind in similar to what you're working with is Ticketmaster. They were using Jenkins, and with their setup and their plugins, it was taking upwards of 2 hours to go through their pipeline to build it. What they found, however, because they were already using GitLab for SCM, when they implemented GitLab CI as part of their process, it took their build time all the way down to 8 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's really great to hear. Another issue I can see here that I have, David, that I'm not the decision maker on what we purchased, right?
I totally understand, Robin, and I appreciate it. First of all, I'm glad the story resonated with you about Ticketmaster. So I'm sure whoever the decision maker is would love to hear that same story and what we talked about. Would that be Brianna?
Yes, that'll be her.
Great. Well, I'll look for a time for all of us to chat, preferably by telephone.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, David, for your time today.
Cool. And scene. So, does anybody have a guess as to what that was? That's fine if you don't. That particular method, we can just jump in here. That is the what's called feel, felt, found. This is an older method. It's been around for a really long time. Feel, felt, found. And I'll caution it for a second. But essentially, what you're doing there is you are acknowledging what the customer says, right? I feel what you're saying. Essentially, when Robin was throwing up his objection, it totally made sense to me that they're using something they've already been using. I understand that. I validated that. I mentioned that other customers have felt the same way, and that this is what we found when they made a change. Okay, so feel, felt, found on there. Now, I mentioned this one because it's a decent one and it can be utilized in the right way, but it's important to know that when you're doing the actual objection here, when you're saying the found part, if you will, you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, right? I knew that Tanuki Tech, this group we're talking to, is part of the media arm. We talked about that earlier when I gave the setup. They're part of the media arm. So the Ticketmaster one hopefully would resonate with them. I wouldn't try to do something else that's not going to be, that wouldn't resonate. So you want to make sure if you're doing this particular technique that you're doing something that's going to be meaningful and actually look like it's going to solve the same problem. You just don't want it to be robotic about it and just say any type of case study. So it's important to know what our case studies are, what stories you can pull out to also to make sure that you're telling a valuable story here. So again, a perfectly valid objection handling technique, but one you want to be just a little bit cautious of because it has been around for a while. Savvy buyers are going to know what you're doing as well and may not want to be manipulated in this particular way. So just something to be aware of.
Cool. Sounds good, David. Any questions before we go over to our next example?
Yeah, I can ask a quick question. I just put it in the doc. To me, so I'm not an expert, so I want you to validate what I'm saying. To me, it's felt that feel, felt, found, and LACE are quite similar. Because in both you're trying to convey, or you're not just trying to convey, but you are listening to what they're saying, accepting it, and then trying to maneuver from there. Would you agree?
Yeah, so it's similar. However, with LACE, and David, of course, feel free to add there. With LACE, you are committing to an explicit action. And also the C part of LACE is something where, you're kind of going there and seeking a commitment from them as well. So feel and found is I would say LACE is more two-way. It's a two-way street, and feel felt found is more empathetic. It's from the point of the view of the person handling the objection.
Incorporating some of that, the empathy and validation from them. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to point out in this particular example, I neglected to say, is that there was an example. I tried to put an example in here of a smoke screen. Right. Robin's first thing was, we may not have time for it. And so I asked the question about, well, if we could mitigate that by fast tracking a training process, for you, would that be okay? And then I found the true objection. Well, maybe we're already comfortable using our CI. So there was something below the actual initial objection. So just by asking additional questions and validating that, I was able to determine more.
Yeah, I would also like to point out, when I did my technique with LACE, I actually omitted the C of LACE, right? I didn't ask for an explicit commitment. So what I did there was I kind of went to reframing from there. And that's another thing you can do. You can kind of combine the two techniques and just make sure it feels natural and you're not pushing the technique just to use the technique. So I don't know if that caused confusion, but yeah, for sure, LACE is a little bit more, you're asking for something from them and also making sure you're committing to the action. So does that answer your question, Shri?
Yeah, no, it was very clear. It seems that both start off the same way, but LACE is a bit more explicit in receiving a commitment from the counterparty. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions here before we move forward? No? All right.
There's another question in the document.
Let me actually, David, do you mind looking at the document?
So David, it's mine. So it was maybe not so much a question, but an acknowledgement that when I'm working my Sal on prepping for a call, we tend to look at who is the customer, what do they sell, that sort of stuff. But I don't think I certainly don't put enough effort or emphasis on, well, what proof points am I going to have lined up that are either spot on or relatively spot on. And so without having memorized 20 or 30 of them, I feel like the refresher there is key. So it's that before the meeting happens, okay, they're in the media business. Let me look at Ticketmaster. Don't let me Goldman Sachs might not be the best answer, even though even though the example is perfect. Yep. So it's that reminder I think is really good. So that's
Thanks, Ken. And I'll say that you're slightly ahead of us, so pay attention. In a little bit, Reshmi's going to get into talking a little bit about that. So thanks for that. That's great.
Sure. Do you see any other questions in the doc?
I do not. I saw Sri and Ken, so thanks. But it is there.
Yeah, I don't want to share the document and share the slide, so I'm just going to stick to the slide. Okay, cool. So for this one, we're going to use another example, and I'm going to be Brianna here, and
That's
David
correct.
is going to take us through.
Yeah. In this one, we're going to set up again. So setting up some context, just background. So now at this point, at least in this example here, Tanuki Tech has purchased GitLab, and they purchased the premium edition. And so now we want to talk to them a little bit about security at this point, right? So you can see here on the example, what Brianna's thinking is that, we want to make sure we're offering the best of breed. So we'll role play with Brianna, me playing myself, and Reshmi playing Brianna here. So we'll start out. And scene, here we go. Hey there, Brianna. Thanks for meeting me. By the way, loving the whole, concert background you got going in the background there. I wanted to reach out based on your recent email about checking out some of the new security functionality in GitLab.
Well, thanks, David. Thank you for, checking out my Zen background. It's certainly top of my mind here in terms of security. And because a division of ours in Metropolis recently got bit due to some vulnerabilities going out in production.
Oof, I'm actually sorry to hear that. And I hope it wasn't too damaging for the organization. So if you could tell me what you're using today for security and how do you think GitLab may be of help?
Sure, yeah. So we are currently using Veracode because they've been around for a while and we get good results and consistent results with them. So the team gets the results at the end of the build and QA, and we make sure we have covered the high and critical ones before anything goes out to prod. It takes a bit of time, but the team is confident in putting out the code. I don't want to get into specifics, but the Vericode's pricing is a bit on the higher side for us.
And thank you. And that sounds reasonable for how you're using it, what you're doing, and it's something we hear from other customers as well. But I just wanted to ask again, how do you envision GitLab helping here?
Sure. And it's interesting you asked that because I saw some of your videos and I saw that the security scanning was included as part of your pipelines. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that would save us some time, but I don't really see GitLab on top of any security scanning tools in the market out there.
Gotcha. And thank you for bringing that up. And I'm glad you did, because that's actually one of our major focuses this year. After the call, as a matter of fact, I'm happy to pass on some materials and roadmap items onto you so you can see how serious we are in investing in that part of the solution. So I know you've already having success with GitLab and our CI, and thank you for that. So if you were to upgrade to the Ultimate Edition and take advantage of the security features, what would you need to see in order to prove that we can, quote, hang with the big boys?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would first want to learn, and I would want to know the team that they can get similar results, if not better reporting from security scans from Veracode. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, I also want to make sure that our cycle time is actually improving due to the scans getting sooner in the process rather than waiting till we go to QA.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And for looking for that kind of criteria, because that sounds like something we can do because we just did it for another customer. A large grocery chain based out of San Antonio was actually in the same position you're in right now. They were using a similarly named security tool and had some pretty decent success criteria they needed to prove out before making this leap. What we did for them was we ran a 2-week proof of value, allowing them to test it out, and as they went through it. And so, would something like that help out, or is that something sounds like you would want to do as well?
Yes, that sounds like something we would want to do.
That's fantastic. So if we could prove out that you get improved cycle time and you get your team similar, if not better results than they're getting right now in Veracode, you'll look to purchase the Ultimate Edition?
Yes, if you can do it, so can we.
Thanks, Brianna. Well, I'll tell you what, I will look to set something up, send you the materials I mentioned earlier. How's next Friday looking for you?
The morning is looking pretty open. So feel free to drop something in my calendar through your cell.
Most certainly will. And scene. Anybody want to take a guess on that one?
Conditional close.
Yes.
Close, yeah.
Conditional close. Well done. Exactly. That's just a pretty simple one. Then scratch my back, scratch yours type thing. Essentially, is what that is. You offer them something they want. You basically have an exchange of value there, and value may not always be the same for everybody, right? Sometimes value. Again, just overall in conditional closes, value could be. This could be something you use in your own house, right? Like I take my daughter to a concert. I don't necessarily need payback for the tickets. A hug and a thank you is all I care. That's my what I need, right? As value back. So so that's the conditional close. Again, setting some sort of condition, verifying with them there were no other things that needed to be met. This is what we want to do. If you buy if we can prove this, you'll do this. Okay. There we go.
Sure. Thank you so much, David. So any further questions, clarifications before we move on to our last technique?
I don't see any in the doc.
No? All right. Cool. So our last technique, David will be Robin, and then just context. So I did a demo for Robin, and Robin is now asking me some questions in the middle of the demo in terms of our security company and so on. I see the example 2 is incorrect here, but this will be the same example. GitLab is in the security company, and we want to ensure we are using best-of-breed tools for security.
You got it.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So good stuff. I appreciate this, but I just don't see GitLab as a security company, and we want to make sure that we're using best-of-breed tools for security.
Yes, Robin, I understand where you're coming from. Did you know that GitLab's goal is bringing a world-class security experience into DevSecOps, with security actually being our largest R&D investment this year, exceeding our SCM and CI investments?
I didn't know that, no.
Interesting. Customers also regularly commend our shift left move as issues are identified directly in the repo for review and triage. And my personal favorite is the vulnerability management. It's built directly into SCM for collaborations with developer. And the third thing I would like to point out is our customers love is the diffing mechanism between our feature branch and default branch allows clear cause and effect with def changes. Do you think you'll be interested in any of these capabilities?
Well, you mentioned the vulnerability management. That would actually help me out, being able to see what's there first before, as we talked about, everything goes to QA. So yeah, that would be very interesting.
Sounds good. So can I propose a deeper dive session with you to understand what exact capabilities you're using from your security tools? Also talk a little bit more about how we do vulnerability management and kind of show you how GitLab can really integrate better with your dev tools.
Sure, that sounds great. I appreciate it. You know what? I'll talk to Brianna, and I guess I'll get back to you with some dates and times.
Sure. We do have some times available on March 3rd and 4th. Please let us know if any of the times will work for you then.
I will.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Sure.
So scene. So anybody wants to guess? So of course, method of elimination. Anybody wants to guess which technique I used here?
Maybe.
Pushback.
Sorry.
Pushback, yeah.
Yes. So I used pushback here. So one of the things I did here, and you can see I, kind of went directly with the facts. I didn't waste a lot of time doing acknowledging and all of that. So one of the things I did here was to kind of throw the facts at Robin and kind of make sure that he is aware of everything that we are doing in terms of company and in DevSecOps. And you will see that a lot of the times when I speak to customers, they have the same feeling. Well, GitLab, Git, CI/CD, SCM, right? They don't really recognize us in the security frame. Another thing I would say is I tried to use empathy, right? So I tried to not dismiss his objection in the first and kind of remembered what David said in the beginning, that objection is not equal to rejection. And I kind of went back and, just made sure that, again, I'm not defending, I'm kind of giving him all the facts up front so he's aware of what we are doing as a DevSecOps company. So any questions here, anything before we move forward?
The only thing I'll mention on here is just real quick jump in is that we talked about misunderstanding early on. When someone's skeptical about what we're doing, misunderstanding, miscommunication is part of that. So in this example, Robin didn't know we were a security company and or didn't really know what our value was for the security company. So this is an example of something. Well, maybe we didn't provide enough value to Robin in the beginning, and this is why the objection was raised. So.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for that, David.
Sure.
Any questions here before we move forward?
Reshmi, I have a quick one. I'm not sure if that scenario is coming, but something I've recently faced with a customer, the objection was, yeah, that's great, but all of your other competitors, mainly was GitHub, saying the same. They are saying the same, they have the same capabilities. We were competing against GitHub mainly in the source code management area with some security capabilities. And they were like, yeah, fine, GitHub is sort of cheaper for us. I'm not sure about that fact. They are saying the same. So why should I go with GitLab? So yeah, I'm not sure if that scenario is coming or is already come up.
Yeah, no, so we are done with that. We are actually done with our role playing for now. I would say two things here. Number one, so if you look at all the techniques that's in the handbook, what GitHub is using, they're using something called FUD. It's a FUD technique, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? This is where our competitors go in and say, well, GitLab is telling you this, we can do the same and we can do this cheaper, right? So that's what they're using. So in order for us to now go ahead and kind of, take the FUD, the whole, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt out of the questions, I would say as an essay, what I have done in the past, I've tried to, again, lead with the facts, right? Oh, this is great. What else is GitHub telling you? Can you tell me a little bit more about, your pain points in general? And I understand it's cheaper, but look at long-term, right? What is your efficiency? Look at your dev efficiency, your op efficiencies. Is GitHub currently meeting any of those scenarios for you? where are you with GitHub right now, right? So when you ask these questions, again, you can, there's another method called curiosity. So essentially that's like asking more questions. And then you can kind of go back to LACE to see once you get answers to the question. Now, two things will happen here. Number one, you might see that GitHub is actually really, ahead. They're already, doing testing. They have done their POV. So at that point, if you really have a champion, you can again push for a demo, or you can kind of push with the facts. Number two, I would say if GitLab is not, didn't start their demo or tech eval yet, we should really try to see if we can get that in, right, with the facts. So again, stating the facts, seeing if we can really get the tech evals, because with GitHub spreading the FUD, the only way we can win is by facts, right? So just making sure they're aware of the facts. All right, I'll stop here.
Yep.
Thank you. David, did you want to add anything here?
No, I think you've covered that well. Again, it's asking more questions. It's offering to prove that value. If we've got what they're actually looking for, we've got the value, and we can prove that out. That's something that we can just let's go toe to toe with it. That's fine.
Cool. Thank you for that question, Samer. Anything else? Any other questions? So we're done with our role playing. Now we'll kind of do a summary and then talk about next steps. No questions? No questions in the doc?
Nope. We're all good.
All right.
I've got a question.
All right.
So I just wonder, so we work with the SALs, right? And then the SALs should do with the SAR do like a discovery, or maybe we do discovery with them.
Yep.
So should these objections be coming up front or just as just part of the process, the sale process? How do you see us work with the SALs, I guess?
Yeah, so Mark, you are jumping ahead in our.
Oh,
so let's stop. No, this is natural, right?
It's
so
like you set them up for it. Nice.
Yes, exactly.
we're on the same team,
not
right?
bribe Mark to do this, right? So exactly, great question. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about where do we really, utilize these techniques and do objection handling. So before the meeting, what I would typically do is, again, gather a lot of information about the company and the attendees. Your SDR, Sal, they already should have these resources. If not, I would say collaborating with them, making sure, they have the personas, they know the company's 10K, whether the company have any higher level initiatives. And a lot of the things that a very quick thing I do is I go and just look at their job openings to see if they have any like cloud initiatives or any other higher level initiatives. So once I know a little bit more background about the company, and this, of course, you cannot do this for every meeting, right? You do this for really, really strategic, impactful meetings. Of course, we would like to do it for every meeting. However, of course, given the bandwidth, make sure you're doing this for every strategic meeting. Brainstorm with your SAL on the potential objections, right? So for example, if you have a similar profile of a company like HEB, what kind of pain points they had. Maybe they have the similar pain points, right? So kind of brainstorm a little bit, spend like 30 minutes, an hour, brainstorming a little bit about the personas. And then, of course, once you go into the meeting, that's when we are not expected to be robots, we are humans. So just keep those things in the back of your mind. And when they start, let's say you're doing a demo, when they start asking these questions, you ask them additional questions. And because you've done that research, you kind of know where you want to go from here, right? Also, another thing I would say is if you encounter a scenario where you don't know what you're doing, like you don't have any idea what they're asking about, again, keep asking further questions where you can get to a point where you can acknowledge the objection with empathy. And it's perfectly fine to say, I don't know about that. Let me do a parking lot on that question. Let me get back to you on that question. That's perfectly fine. You want to make sure at the end of the day, before you go to a meeting, you are agreeing the success criteria for the meeting. For example, if you go to a demo and the next step is for you to deliver a hands-on workshop with this team, make sure you're getting to that objective, at least pitching that objective. And the fourth thing, of course, once we practice a lot of these techniques, so this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Today we spoke about the processes, We spoke a little bit more about techniques. We want this to become our second nature. So going forward, I'll talk a little bit in the next slide about what we want to do with all our team meetings. But we want this to become second nature so that once you hear an objection, you might not know the answer, but you might know how to handle it based on the techniques, right? So looking at the bigger picture, where you want to reframe the conversation without going head on and using some of the techniques like conditional close that we use. And definitely, use parking lot for these. And again, after the meeting, follow up with specific resources, questions, and so on. And another thing I did see that was really successful is just giving them the next steps right there and then on, right? So not waiting for an email. Sometimes, they would say, well, let me get back to you on an email. That's fine. Again, be natural, don't push too hard. But those are some of the things that we have seen that working in the past. Mark, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. If I looked ahead, I wouldn't have asked. Yes.
Oh, I did bribe you for this, so no problem.
It's perfect.
Okay, cool.
So,
any
I would love for this to be my reality, right? When what happens is the SDR finds a lead.
Yep.
The opportunity is on stage 0.
Yeah.
They already agree on a meeting where I'm gonna demo something which I don't know what it is, and I have an invite on my inbox for, and then it's been improving. At least now I have a document of notes from the SDR's meeting, right? So what is your suggestion there? And am I the only one? Am I the only one in this position that I'm not doing my job as pushing back, or what is?
So, I will let David also answer here. One of the things I've done, in the past, the same thing, right? Sal or SDR putting meetings on our calendar. I actually had a preset list of discovery questions for them, like 10 questions. And we do have that. I don't know if you've seen that yet, Hugo, but we do have that. And you kind of send them that and say, hey, I'm happy to take this meeting.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
can you
I've sent them handbook docs and all that. Yes, I'm aware. So are they. I'm just trying to find a balance. My point, Reshmi, is I love it, right? Like that's my dream. And I think shortly your answer is that, yeah, let's at least adopt this on the really strategic opportunities, right? We obviously not gonna follow through this in every single one.
Oh,
yeah. Also, I would say that try your, I think at that point, you kind of become like a parrot. If somebody sends you a meeting, I would send them those questionnaire, or I would ask those questions again and again. There'll be a point, and this comes with habit. There'll be a point where they will think about, hey, I have to now send Hugo a meeting. Do I really want that pushback, or should I just send him this information up front, right? Not every SDR is going to do that with you. And they won't be doing that for every company. But I would also say, don't be afraid to reject meetings where it doesn't make sense, right? Because a lot of the times what we are seeing, the essays are pulled into qualification much, much earlier. And look at our ratio, it's 2.5 to 1, right? So it's also our time when we are asking you all to say, hey, let's strategize. You need that time to strategize, right? Rather than wasting on these unqualified meetings. So.
But I'm curious to know, Hugo, though, how effective are those meetings that you're pulled into?
How effective are they?
The ones where there's no.
They're like this. They're like this. In my mind, they're discovery meetings that should have happened. They're effective because I jumped in and I did all the discovery that it wasn't done, right?
So is it effective discovery, or are you actually demonstrating in that meeting?
Both, right? Both, because the customer, because of the nature, I think, especially of the nature of a level of contact, the customer is speaking with the SDRs, at least in my region, they are very much CE users in vast majority, right? They are versed on GitLab. And then when the SDR lands the opportunity, or that, I shouldn't say opportunity, but the lead, a bunch of technical questions flood them, and then they go into desperate mode, and then the answer is, oh yeah, no, let me get my technical guy on the phone for you, right? So it sounds like our workforce, at least in my patch, it's not objectively handling, right? Using objection handling, I should say, objectively using objection handling in a way that says, hey, let's hold on your horses, right? Let me try to understand more of the business problems you're trying to solve. Let me not freak out because you're throwing these soup letters on me, or you're talking about all those things that I have no clue what they are, right? And then, yes, I'm gonna bite your request and say, yep, my solutions architect is gonna have a meeting right away. And then when I get over in a meeting as a solutions architect, right, I am doing a very basic discovery and demo at the same time, right? And then sometimes there is like wild expectations of like, yeah, just let's give you an end-to-end demo based on what? Like, what is that really? Oh yeah, and then they are using Jenkins, GitHub, and there's this laundry list that they fulfill the requirements, but we don't get to the bottom of it until like 2, 3, 4 meetings later. You know what I mean? I think it's more of a combination of the mindset of the customer, you know, show me this, and you know, a poor handling on the early cycle of like, yeah, we absolutely would be happy to show you this, but let's understand why, the whys, where you're at, how many teams are talking about, what are you talking about? You're thinking about rolling out this entire organization, you think about rolling to just a specific business unit, what problems you're trying to solve, right? All that context doesn't come with my qualifications.
I'm
Sorry,
gonna jump in
very
real quick.
long.
No, I appreciate it because it's absolutely valid. We've only got 3 minutes left in this meeting. And I think so in the process of what we learned today, can we put this on a parking lot? Can we talk about this in an upcoming meeting? Because I think this would be valid for everyone to learn about. So I don't know if we want to make this a topic of another, you know, CS exchange, something along those lines, or put it into another meeting, but absolutely, I think we want to make sure to address that. Is that?
Yeah, and it sounds like I'm getting some positive reinforcement here.
Oh, I'm looking at the comments here and everyone is.
Also, Julie pointed out something which is true. They do have their own essays, Christopher Wang, who actually started with me. So that's a great point. Thanks for pointing that out, Julie. So maybe we can utilize him as well, right?
So here's my suggestion, really quickly. I think we are, at GitLab in general, we are, and I've discussed this, that's not even my realization, someone else's, I'm not gonna call anybody out, but anyhow, and then I agree with that realization. I think we are focusing very much on specializations, right? This message with us, it's great, it's not bad, but I think we need to focus on cross messaging. How about instead talking about the subject with the SAs, with the CS, right? What if we try to talk about this on the team setting? You know, CS with marketing, with sales, right? Do a more of like a coordinated strategy in terms of let's all agree on this flow to be more effective.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Hugo. So let's talk a little bit more about enterprise meeting. Also, I do think that we as SAs, we need to push back with empathy a little bit more, right? And really ask those questions, because we don't do that enough. And that's my experience has been, right? Cool. So I'm going to move forward. I do have just quick slides to cover. So, you know, in true sense, next step. So what is our next step? So we are going to facilitate objection handling exercise for you all in the team meetings. So what is that going to be like? Really, really simple. We are going to we have some list of objections we got from the field that's there here in the handbook. We will use some randomized method to kind of pick the objection, and a volunteer, we're not going to volunteer people here, to handle that objection. Given, like, let's say in 5 minutes, they will handle the objection, and then we will have the rest of the team give feedback. At the end of the exercise, the objective of this exercise will be to come up with a list of objections that we see pretty frequently from our customers, and then to come up with really great responses that we can distribute to the field, right? So we're not kind of reinventing the wheel. So that's something we'll be doing. We'll be starting with the US Enterprise, EMEA, APAC, all of the SA teams. And I'll be happy to collaborate with the other CS teams as well to do this exercise, right? So now going back to my slides, I think that's, all right. So these are some of the resources. Again, there's a lot going on here. We have LinkedIn courses, a lot of things going on. The only thing I would say is practice, right? Practice makes habit, and we have to practice this. So please make sure if you face any objections, write it down so you can share it with us, right? So we can practice it together as a team. So that's all I'll say here. Thank you for your time today. I know we are on time. Any further questions before we let you all go?
Thank you all again. Hugo, thank you for bringing up that awesome topic. As mentioned, we'll work together to get something set up so we can all chat together as a larger organization.
I appreciate. Thank you.
We appreciate you, sir.
I have one question in the document. It can be answered offline.
Cool.
Thank you.
I'll take a look.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, team.